for last week, actually, we've been looking at using various ASP.NET components that allow us to interact with the database. We looked at the grid view, the details view, right? And we saw how we can interact with databases, with tables, with these components that already have a lot of the basic plumbing for being able to insert, delete, update, select records from a database. Yes? And it looks like we could build pretty much anything, and it's true. I mean, they are very powerful. But today I wanted to introduce a mechanism that will allow us to have more freedom on how is it that we want to interact with the database, how is it that we render this information on our pages, and really make it much more open on how is it that we build data-driven applications. Okay. All right. So let's look at where we've been. Let's see. So last week, 4550. Is it? No, not here. CS4550. We look at some experiments that we saw how to work with tables, with various relationships, right? One-to-one relationship, one-to-many relationship, many-to-many. But we were using, for all these, we were using the grid view and the detail view components, right? And those components kind of wrote the SQL for us, right? And took care of the plumbing on how is it that our components connected to the database. So today we'd like to create our own plumbing, right? Our own way of interacting with the database from scratch, right? Instead of using any of these components, right? So let's see. I believe we had created a couple of tables. Right, we had created courses and faculties and students and whatnot, right? So let's keep working with that. Let's look at some of the data that we have there. We had several courses, the title, prize, which I believe is a float or double, and the author of those the author for those courses, right? So we would like to be able to display the same information on a page using database connections. Okay? But let's use another technology. Let's use another technique. Right? We're going to introduce today the data access object, DAOs. Okay? DAO is a pattern, a design pattern on how to create classes and objects and architect applications that use a data layer, right, or relational database in the back end. And the basic idea is that although whenever you can access a database, you can just write a SQL query and go ahead and connect to a database. I mean, we can certainly do that. It's usually you would usually end up with your data access spread all over your application, right? And that makes it very, very hard to develop, very hard to maintain, very hard to see what's going on. So the basic idea of the data access object is to encapsulate all the data access into a single or set of classes that are dedicated to the data access, to accessing the data to a database, right? So all your data access needs would be encapsulated in these set of dedicated classes. Okay? So let's look at some of how would we do it without the DAO first, right? And see how the DAO would be is a better solution. Okay? So let's first talk about some data, right? So let's create here. New item. So a web form. Let's just first do a hello world, right? Hello. And notice that the way I created this, I created it by right-clicking and saying Add New Item. You see that? And when I created the page, notice that I clicked on this. It says Place Code in Separate File. You see that? Right. What that did is created the ASP plus an additional .cs. You see that? Okay. And that CS, we used to put all our C# inside of a script tag inside of our page. Okay. Right. And in there we could put maybe the page load. Right. We could put any button event handlers. But today I'd like to show you that you can also, or instead, put your source code separately in a separate CS file, right? This is an accompanying file, CS file that accompanies your page. And let me make sure that I'm recording. Am I recording? Yeah, it looks like. Okay, so look at this. This is the CS that was generated. See that? It loads a couple of other packages, right? Some system packages, some web packages, and it automatically declares for you an empty page load. Okay, right, where you can put in there any code that you want to execute when the page first loads. Right. Other than that, it's the same. Right. Here's the ASPX. Right. Here's the ASPX and the accompanying, what we call the code behind file, right? The hello.aspx.cs. Notice it has the same name, right? The only thing that it has is .cs at the end. Okay, and the way they're tied together is that the hello world, the hello page says, right, what file contains my code. It says, hey, that other file is the one who contains my C# code. It also, notice that it declares a class. See a class here? The class is based on the location of the file. The file is located on the directory CS4550, under directory experiments, under directory DAO, and then the file name is 00hello. So it has a very peculiar naming convention based on the location, making sure that this file is unique, right? And then the way these are connected to one another is that the page inherits from the class. See that? It inherits from the class. So anything that you declare on the parent are also viewable on the child. This is a child class of the parent class. Okay, so that's how they talk to one another. Okay, so for instance, if I drag in here, something from my toolbox, right? If I drag here a label, right? I can drag in the label in here, and the name. Notice that the name of this label right now is label 1. That's the default name. If I call it the hello label, right now it's not doing anything, right? The label doesn't. It has some default text, right? It has a default text label. There it is. Where is it? Text. Where's text? There it is. Label text, right? If I remove that, there is no text, right? If I refresh, that label has no text, right? And we can programmatically set it from our code behind. Anything I declare on the page, I can see here in the code behind. So for instance, that label over there, I believe I called it hello, right? Hello. There it is, hello label. See that? It finds it, and I can programmatically set its text. Hello world. And if I refresh, there it is, hello world. So it's the same thing, right? It's almost what we had originally. It's a little different. I just moved my code to a dedicated CS file, right? No longer embedded in the page. Everybody okay? All right. All right. Same thing when same thing if I drag in a button. If I drag in a button and I say, if I click on this button, on click, and I say that I want to generate an event, that event is generated in the CS file. Notice that it has an asterisk next to it. You see that? Right, because of what I just did when I created that on-click event handler, it wrote into the code behind, it wrote that event handler in there. You see that? And it's not valid until I save it. Now I saved it. So when I click on that button, this is gonna run, right? So in the event handlers, I can see all the other elements that are available in my page, right? Okay, button clicked. I can modify, I can access, I can send data back to my my UI. So if I refresh, there's my button. If I click on it, it can access everything else. All right. Okay. So very, very similar to what we had last week, right? We were doing everything on the page. I just separated this. Okay. All right. Okay, let's keep going. Something else that I'd like to introduce is iterators. Last week, we were using various dedicated iterators that display the text or display the content in a very peculiar format, right? We looked at data list, we looked at a grid view, right? And a lot of you came to me saying, so, no, don't we have something that is a little more generic that would allow us to display this in any which way we want, right? Not necessarily as a table, not necessarily as a list, not necessarily as divs. You know, could I have something that, you know, lets me decide how I want to display this? Okay, and exactly that. We have repeaters allow us to do exactly that, right? It allows us to iterate over some content, but it allows us to decide what to do in that as we iterate over that content. Okay, so let me introduce you to repeaters real quick. I'm going to say add. I'm going to another form. We call this 010 repeaters. And so what repeaters can do is, as the like the name suggests, right? They can repeat over a collection, right? And instead of giving you a template, instead of using one of those hard-coded templates that these other components, like the data list, generate for you, what it does is that it lets you decide what these templates are. Okay, so let's play around with a repeater. Let's drag in a repeater. There it is, repeater. I'm going to drag it in here. There it is. Right, and it you know, by default, it names is repeater 1. I run at server, and what's going to happen is that this repeater, you need to give it a data source. You know, where am I grabbing the data from, right? Whether it's from a data source from a database, or is it an array or a collection, a list? What is it, right? We need to give it to it, you know, and then it will iterate over each one of those and display the content. Okay, right? To iterate over this, over something, you can give it any number of templates. You can give it a template, you know, what to show the very first time, what to show the very last time, right? Like what the header suggests, right? The header template is, what do you want to display the very first time that I iterate, or actually before, right? Right before I start iterating, what do you want me to display? Or at the end, right after I'm done iterating over my collection, what do you want me to display? And item template allows you to give it a template that says, you know, what do you want me to show every time I iterate over this? Okay. Right. So here's item template. All right. So here it is. whatever I type in here, if it's divs or ULs or table rows or whatever HTML I choose here, it will be copied and pasted, right? Every time it iterates over a collection, right? We just have to give it what that collection is. So let's create a collection. Give it a collection. So repeaters. Here I am in repeater. What we're going to do is we're going to first create a collection of data. Right, let's create a collection of data. Let's say let's create a couple of courses. So I've created. Actually, let me create a brand new one just to start from scratch. Let's see. Let's create a new table. Let's create a movie table. How's that? And so the table is going to be called movie. And I'm going to have this increment by itself. A movie has, let's see, has a title. Right, and that's varchar. Maybe has a plot. Okay, let's leave that. Here we go. And I'm going to update. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an object, a class, to be able to hold the data, right? So let's create here under experiments, under 4550, we'll create a class. Create a class that can hold the data for that table, right? So we'll call it just like the name of the table. We'll call it that. We'll call it the same. The class will be called exactly the same thing as the table. So movie, and in here we're going to declare a couple of attributes, right? Same properties, same fields that we have for the movie table. Let's see. We have an integer ID with setters and getters. We have a string title, setters and getters. And we also have a string plot, also setters and getters. Okay? And maybe a constructor that allows us to provide all this information. Int ID, string title, and string plot, which just copies all these into the local instance variables. Right? Okay. Let's see. And this is so let's create certain values for movie. Right? Let's create a whole bunch of movies. Not in the database. Let's leave the database for now. We're going to create just movie instances here in memory, and I just want to be able to iterate over them in the iterator. Okay, so let's create a couple of movies. So movie, and is it the correct version? Okay, so movie, movie one, new movie. IDs doesn't matter because right now they're not database, right? I'm just creating IDs here. Title, let's use Terminator. I'll be back. And let's create maybe movie. Let's create second movie. Movie. Aliens. Any memorable? Oh, yeah, well, there's a whole bunch of them, but I can't write them here. They're not appropriate. Get away from her. You. Right, and movie M3. What else? Avatar. I like James Cameron. This is kind of like a futuristic version of Dancing with Wolves. How's that? Futuristic. All right. So now let's create a collection of these things, right? So let's say I want to create a list of movies. Right, movies. New list of movies. And let's add all these movies to the collection, right? So we're going to say movies.add M1, and let's add all of them, right? So M1, M2, and M3. Okay, we have the collection now. So what I would like to be able to do is render this on the page, right? Now, presumably these movies instances would have not been hard-coded like we have here, but instead they would have been read in from the database, right? Ideally. And then once we have it in the list, we would send it over to the repeater for to be rendered. Okay. So let's the way to send it to the repeater is that we give it a name, I believe, didn't we? We call the repeater. Oh, here's the ID. Yeah, movie repeater. Let's call it movie repeater. Okay. And so now in my code behind, what I can do is I can reference that movie repeater. I can say that its data source, I can set its data source. It says, I'm telling the movie repeater, hey, grab the data that I want you to display. Here's the data. I'm giving it to you. The data source, the source for your data is this list of movies. Okay? And then we need to tell it when to actually look at it and actually render the data that I've been giving. Okay? And to do that, we do another call, a call to the data bind method. It says this binds the data that I just gave you and makes it ready to be rendered in the front end. Okay. So let's go to the ASPX and let's run this. All right, it's giving us gibberish, but that gibberish is exactly what I asked you to do, right? In the ASPX, I told it what I want is, whatever I have in between these item templates, yes, that's what I want you to render for every item, and that's exactly what it did. There's 3 items, it generated three gibberish entries. Make sense? Right? I might decide that instead I want to use a UL, which I can declare outside of the repeater, and then afterwards, right, to close it. And then inside of the repeater, I can decide that instead I want LI. Right, if I re-render this, notice that I get 3 bullets. Right? What I want to be able to do is show actual data. Right? I want data. So we might say I want here a span. I want to show here maybe the title. Here I want to have the plot and maybe display the ID, right, for each one of these. So the way we could do this is that in here we could say to be able to access each object, because notice that as it's iterating, each item template is bound to the current instance of the iteration, right? So the first time around, it will be bound to the first movie. And then as it iterates the second time around, it will be bound to the second movie. And then as it iterates the one last time, item template will be bound to the third movie. Make sense? Okay? So each time it iterates, it's bound to a different instance. What we want to do here is I want to grab from the current iteration instance, I want to grab a particular property, right? And the movie object, right? We saw earlier the movie object has 3 properties, right? It has the ID, it has a title, and it has a plot. Yes? Right? And basically we want to say, hey, we want to tell the repeater, grab the property plot or grab the property title and render it here. Okay? The way to do that is to use the following directive. You can say evaluate the property ID of the current instance of the iteration, right? The current item that we're iterating over, what's the item? M1, right? I want you to grab the property ID and display it, okay? Or we can say, I want to render the title, okay? Or I want to render the plot, right? So now, oops, something went wrong. The exception system, but was unhandled. Additional movie does not contain. It doesn't. Did I not put ID in there? Movie. I do have an ID. Set get. Oh, are these not public? Okay, let me try that again. Okay, there it is. Yep. They were by default, if you don't declare them as public, they are protected, meaning they're only accessible to other classes that are in the same package, right? But not accessible to anybody who's outside. Okay. So there it is. We were able to render the data in that collection. Everybody good? Right. We can very easily change the way it renders. Like for instance, what we could do, right? We can replace UL with table. We can replace LI with table row, and we can replace spans with TDs. And save it, and then if we render, it renders as a table. Okay, and we can even style it with Bootstrap. So this is class container, and this is class table and table stripe. Notice that how much easier it is that we're working with our own templates, right? We're deciding exactly how we want this to be rendered, right? We're not tied to the tyranny of a particular component. Okay. All right, so great. So we have repeaters. Let's keep going. Now, what we want to be able to do is retrieve actual movies in there, right? In the database. Let's do that. Let's create some movies first. Let's create some movies. So here's movie. Right, so title, again, we'll use avatar, plot for avatar, Terminator 2, plot for Terminator 2. What other movies did he make? Oh, Aliens, obviously. Aliens. Plot for Aliens. Okay, so we have some movies in there. Very good. So let's see how could we retrieve them. Right. All right. One way to retrieve them is right in the. We could do it right in the page load. Right. Let's retrieve it. Where's our experiments? CS4550. Okay, there we go. So we could just take this repeater, take the same copy of the repeater, and new item. We'll say 020 repeater renders SQL query. Let's see. Let's copy the same that we had earlier. Let's see. What do we have here? What could we copy from this? I'm going to copy everything in the body. Here it is. So it's the same repeater we had earlier, right? It's the same repeater exactly. Right? Notice it's the same. It says form one, container, right? The same tables. Tables is striped, right? And the name of the repeater is also called movie repeater, and it's expecting a class object, an object that has the properties ID, title, and plot. But what's going to be different is where are we going to grab the data from? Okay. In the previous example, we grabbed it from a hard-coded list, right? Hard-coded list of instances. Instead, what we're going to do now is we're going to grab the data from the database. So let's do that. Let's do that. Let's open it up. So in the page load, we're going to declare the same list of movies. List of movies, right? But the way we're gonna fill it in is from the database, right? At the end, we do want to do the following, right? We want to say repeater, movie repeater, right? Dot your data source. Your data source is movies, and then bind, right? Movie repeater dot data bind. But we have to fill in that list of movies, okay? So let's do that. Let's do that by connecting to the database and retrieving those records. All right, let's do that by hand. Remember, we did this last week, but what we did is we used components, right, that knew how to do this already. We're doing it by hand right now, okay? And because, you know, we might want to have a much more advanced, much more customized behavior that is not supported by the underlying framework. Okay. All right. So let's do that. So the way we're going to do this is to use the SQL, the SQL. Oh, it's not available. Wait. We have to first import a couple of libraries and say using system.data.SQL client. Meaning we want to use some classes, right, that allow us to create a client to SQL, right? The first one that we're going to use under that namespace is a SQL connection. There it is, connection. We first want to connect to a database. Right? So here's connection. Say new SQL connection, and it takes as argument. It takes as argument the data source. It takes the connection string, right, needed to be able to connect to whatever database you want to connect to. To do that, let's look at the database that we want to connect to. It's this one right here. We'll connect to this one, 4550. Is it that one? Okay, let's look at the properties. And notice that one of the attributes there is the connection string. You see that connection string? I'm going to copy that. Copy. And I'm going to go back to my connection. There it is. I'm going to put in here the connection. I'm going to put it as a string. I'm going to paste whatever I copied. There it is. It's giving me an error. That's because I have this backslash, right, which is typically an escape character. But what we could do is put an @ sign in front of it so that it interprets it literally, right, without needing to escape any characters. Okay? All right, we're connected. We have a connection to a database. Let's connect to a database. We're going to say connection. Open. There it is. And before I forget, I'm going to close it. Okay. It might not matter too much when it's just you using your particular instance of a database. But if you're working in a shared environment where the database is shared amongst quite a few people, right? If you don't close your connections, the database is going to run out of connections eventually, right? Connections eventually time out. But if you have, 100, students or developers hitting that same database, right, and everybody's forgetting to close their connection, the database eventually is going to come back with an exception saying, I don't have any more connections to give out. Okay, so don't be that person, right? Your fellow developer is going to say, who's forgetting to close the connections, right? And your source code typically is in source control, so everybody is publicly looking at your code. So remember to close your connections. Okay, so there's your connection. We opened it, we closed it. So in between opening and closing, we want to talk to the database, right? We're going to grab some data from the database. To do that, we're going to need to send it a SQL command, right? Such as select everything from the movie table, right? That's what we want to do. So let's create a SQL command from the connection. You can say create command. And then we can set what the SQL statement is going to be that we want to execute. So we can say command dot text, command text, there it is, the actual SQL command that we want to run, right? And what we want to do is something like select everything from movie table, right? So that's the select statement that we want to execute against the database. There it is. Now what we need to do is actually execute the command, right? And the way to execute it is we say command dot execute reader for reading from the database. I am going to read from the database. This returns to us an object that we can use to iterate over all the rows for our query. Okay, so this what it returns is a SQL reader, SQL data reader. There it is. That we can use to iterate over each row that matches. In this case, we only have 3 rows, right? And we want to iterate over those 3 rows. So what happens is that reader has a read method that what it does is that it reads from the, from a row, from the current row, and then it advances to the next row, right? So basically the way we interact with the reader is that we do while reader read, so it's reading the next set of data, and it advances the cursor, the database cursors, to the next row. Okay. All right. So now we've advanced. We're looking at the first row. We're looking at the very first row. When there are no more rows, the read method will return false, and it'll fall, and you'll fall out of the while loop. Okay. So let's see. I want to retrieve. Let's create a new movie. New movie. And we're going to set the ID. We're going to grab it from the reader. Yes, we're going to say reader, grab the ID. Right? When it reads, when you say dot read, it reads and it creates a map. Right? A map based on the names of the columns. Right? That you can then read, right? And retrieve the data so that you can copy it over. Right? Now it returns a generic type. Right? You need to cast it to the correct data type. Right, these are integers, so I'm going to cast it. It's going to cast it to the right data type. Then what else do we have? We have reader. We have title, which is a string. So this is reader title. What I'm doing here is I'm populating my object model. Right, I'm creating my object instance, and I'm populating it from the row. So this movie dot plot equal string reader plot. Okay? And finally, now that we have the movie instance, we're going to add it to our list of movies, right? Because that's what I'm going to send back to the reader to render. So I'm going to add, I'm going to say movies dot add. Okay? As I iterate, I'm populating my list of movies. Eventually, I'll fall out of the while loop. I'll close, and I'll send that list of movies to be rendered by the movie repeater. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's try this. Right. Let's see if it blows up. All right, it looks like it works, right? This is exactly the data that we have, right? Isn't it? It's the data that we have in the table, right? Plot, right? Let's see. Right, that is, I believe, the same data we have here. Okay, there it is. Yeah, the 3 movies are there. All right, everybody good? Okay. How about if we insert? We want to insert. How would we do this? We would have, let's see, we would have to have some kind of form, right? That when we click on a button, it reads the values from that form, and then it inserts into this, right? So let's see. The way we would do this, I guess we don't have the bootstrap link. Let me copy it in there so that it renders a little prettier. There it is, right? We've got our table. Very good. If I want to create something in my table, maybe I can create here a table head, right? And I can create here a table row and a table, right, with this says ID as title and plot. And under that, we can create maybe a I can create an input field. Now, not an input field, right? This needs to be read from the back end, right? It needs to be read from the code behind. So instead, I'm going to create an ASP colon input field, so a text box, right? Text box. The ID I'm going to give it, this is going to be the title, right? Text box. Actually, this is not going to be the first one, right? It's going to be the second one. This is going to be empty. I won't let you type in the ID. So the first one will be a non-breaking space, right? I'm not going to let you type the ID. So here's the ID for the text box. This is run at server, right? And what else? That's it, right? And maybe we can style it. So this is a form, a control. Let's see if that works. There's the input field. There it is. We need another one. Another one. This is going to be the plot. So this will be plot text box. Okay. And the last one, maybe we need a button. Right, so we'll say TD. This will be an ASP button, right? So that we can invoke event handlers in the code behind. So this will be button. ID is create button, run at server, and CSS class will be button and button primary. Right? And we want to invoke in the code behind an event handler saying, create a brand new one, and I'll call it create button click. There we go. We need a text that says create. All right, let's see. Oops. What are we missing? ASP, repeater, blah, blah, blah. The button. Did I miss something in the button? I ASP experiment, blah, 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 does not contain a definition for create, but, oh, yeah, so notice what happened, right? This is a very common thing that you forget, right? You create the event handler. Notice that the code behind is a file now is not, it's unsaved. See that? Because what it does is that it writes to this file, adding the event handler, but it does not save the file, right? So I'm going to save it. Try to go again. There it is. Okay. All right. I think we're almost there. Let me just add an additional non-breaking space here. There we go. All right, so I want to create here. So we can do that here. How do we do that? We can say, here's a create button. What do? We need to grab, right? We need to grab the, those text fields, right? Everything, right? We need to grab the text fields. So string, title, we're going to grab it from where? From those text boxes, yes? So where's the text box? It's called what? It's going to call title text box. There it is. Here's a text. There it is. Okay. And we need to grab the plot. So here's the plot box. Grab the text. There it is. All right, there we go. So we have enough information to do an insert into a database. Yes? So let's do an insert into a database. Let me grab a connection. So it'll be a SQL connection. It's a new SQL connection. And it's the same connection string from this schema. I'm going to copy that. I'll paste it here. Notice that this first part is similar to the first for when we were querying, right? It would be nice if we could reuse some of that, right? Instead of having to do this over and over. All right, we got the connection. We're going to open the connection. There we go. And before I forget, we're going to close it. We're going to create a SQL command. Oops. SQL command, CMD, from the connection, create command. And that command is going to be CMD command text is going to be insert, right? Insert into movie. Yes, insert into movie. We need to give it the fields. We're going to say title and plot. We're going to give it the values. The values are whatever I just grabbed, right? This title and plot. Now we could do this and say title here and then plot. We could do that. Right? That's considered to be a very bad practice, right? This would make us vulnerable to SQL injection, okay? Because what if somebody, right, for a title, when they're inserting the title, they type something like quote, quote, right, close, and it says delete, the start, writing SQL here, right? That notice that because of being concatenated, it's as if I'm putting what here? I'm putting quote, quote, close, delete, or whatever, right? Okay, so we don't want that to happen to us, right? So instead of concatenating, oh, there's a nice XKCD XKCD SQL injection. There's a XKCD that makes fun of SQL injection. So this is the principal calling a student's mom, saying, "Hi, this is your son's school. We're having some computer trouble. So the mother answers, "Oh dear, did he break something?" Says, "Well, in a way. Did you really name your son Robert colon parentheses a quote parentheses semicolon drop table students?" Semicolon dash dash, meaning everything afterwards is a comment, right? Meaning ignore any other commands that the code might have, right? So ignore everything afterwards. So it says, "Oh yeah, little Bobby tables we call them." It says, "Well, we've lost this year's students records. I hope you're happy." And the mother says, "Well, and I hope you've learned to sanitize your database inputs." Meaning all these inputs, right? All these inputs, they need to be sanitized, right? If we're allowing people to enter free form text, right? We have to make sure that we're not vulnerable. Well, there's an easy way to go around this without having to sanitize this. We can let the database sanitize, right? What we could do is use parameters. You can say at title. Well, actually, we would need to use prepared statements, but we talk about prepared statements in a database course. But here we're just going to use parameters. So at title and at plot. All right. So we have the command text. And now we have the values here. We need to feed the values into here, right? So let's do that. We're going to do command dot get the parameters. Command dot parameters. These are all the parameters. I'm going to add a new parameter. I'm going to add new SQL parameter. For the placeholder title, I'm going to give it the value for the variable title. Okay? And same thing for the plot. I'm going to add another parameter, new SQL parameter. For the placeholder plot, I'm going to give it the value of plot. There we go. So basically what I'm doing is I'm feeding the values into these placeholders, but I'm not concatenating them. You see that? Right? I do not want to concatenate. All right, there we go. Okay, now that I have the SQL command, I want to execute it. Right? I really want to insert the data. Right? So what we're going to do, we're going to say cmd.execute. Not reader, because we're not reading anything from a database, right? Instead, we're going to do execute a non-query, meaning an update. Right? Anything that is not a query is an update. So a delete, an update, an insert, all those are updates. Okay, those are non-query. All right, so I'm going to execute that. All right, and that's going to hopefully insert into a database. And let's try it out. We're still in 20, yes. Okay. All right, so let's create here Titanic. A plot, it sinks at the end. And I call create, and it didn't work. Wait a minute. Let me refresh the page. It did work. All right, it did insert it. We just didn't refresh the page. Okay, so it looks like it is working, but notice what's happening in our page. Notice what's happening in our code behind. Okay? We are writing all this SQL and all these commands. What if I want to do this in a separate page? What would I need to do? I would need to rewrite this, right? Any of these connections, any of these queries. It'd be very, very inconvenient having to do this, right? So what I want to be able to do instead is be able to put this in a central place where I can reuse this over and over across many pages, right? So to do that, we're going to use the data access object pattern, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to stop this for a second. We're going to go in here, and in our app code experiments, and for 4550, I'm going to create here an object, a C# object, a class, right, that will be dedicated to accessing the database. Right? Instead of having it, strewn across all the pages, we're going to centralize that in a single place. Right? It's a very common design pattern. We'll call it class. We'll call it movie DAO. Okay. The naming convention is that it has the same name as the table that you're manipulating. Okay. So if you have lots of tables, there would be perhaps one DAO per table. Okay. Or if those tables are related to one another, right? Because those tables have a parent-child relationship. One of them has a foreign key back to the other, right? Perhaps one DAO would allow you to manipulate several tables. Yes? Right? Okay. But let's keep it simple. One table, one DAO. Okay, so in this DAO, what we want to do is provide the various operations that you would typically do to a database, right? We saw last week that basically we need 4 or 5 very standard operations, right? Sometimes referred to as the CRUD operations, right? We need to be able to create a row. We need to be able to read. We need to be able to update and delete. Correct? Right? So let's do these. Right? Create, read, update, and delete. Right? And we're going to centralize all those operations in this one class. Right? So we already wrote create, didn't we? We wrote it. Where did we write it? We wrote it over here. Right? The insert we wrote. Right? There it is. Let's copy this and put it in our DAO. So let's create here. We're going to say public void create movie. And here we're going to drop it here, the code. Notice it's complaining because it can't find SQL connection, but that's okay. That's inside of the system. .data.SQL client. That's where it is. Okay. And now, what else is it complaining about? It's complaining about title and plot. You see that? And it doesn't have a title or plot. How can we pass it? We can either do two things. One of the things that we could do is we can pass the title and the string over here. Title, like this, title and plot. We can do that. Yes? Or a better solution might be that we pass you the entire object, right, that has all those attributes inside. Okay? This would make it a little more object-oriented. Right? I'm passing, instances around. Now that I have the movie object, I can then say movie.title, and movie.plot. Okay? Okay? All right. What else did we write? I think we wrote another one, didn't we? What else did we write here? We wrote this reader. See that? That it populates the list of movies? Well, that's useful. That's a read operation, isn't it? Well, let's copy that. Copy that. Let's go to our DAO. And that's a read operation, right? But actually, remember, there's actually two types of read operations, aren't they? There's one for reading a single row, and there's also being able to read an entire table, right? So there's two reads actually here. So this we'll call them by read one, or read by ID, and read all. Okay. So this one is actually read all, isn't it? We'll say public. And this returns a list of movies, So read all. I'm just going to paste it here. And it says, let's see, it creates the movies, it creates a connection, it iterates over the read, instantiates all the movies, and at the end, it returns the movies. Very good? Make sense? Right. We still need update and delete. We'll do that in a minute. Right? We'll do that in a few. Right. For now, let's play around with our movie DAO. Okay, and see how would we write? How would we use this? Right? How would we write? Use this to rewrite the pages that we already have. Okay. All right. So let's go back to the pages that we had. So this is a repeater render SQL query, right? So let's write another version of the same thing, but using our DAO. Okay, so I'm going to create here another page. Add new item called 020. Where are we? Did 20, so 030. So repeater renders DAO from DAO or using DAO. All right, there it is. So let's open that up. Let's see if we could reuse anything here. Right now, it's not doing anything. So why don't we copy the same repeater that we were using earlier. So let's starting from the link right under the title. Just going to copy that all the way to the end. Copy that. Okay, and I'm going to here, right under the title, I'm just going to select everything and paste. It's the same exact repeater we had 2 seconds ago. Okay? All right, it's the same repeater, but the page load, right, and the button are going to be a little different. Okay? So I'm going to recreate this event handler. I'm going to recreate the event handler. Unclick. There we go. So that's okay. There's what we have so far in our code behind, right? We just have page load and then the event handler, and they're blank, right? For now, they're blank. We're going to use the DAO to populate this. Okay, so let's do that. Let's do the following. We'll say for the page load, get a hold of the movie DAO. Actually, we can declare the movie DAO up here. We can say movie DAO, new movie DAO. There it is. And what we want to do is use the DAO. I want to retrieve all the movies. Yes. So we'll do read all. That name should be read all movies, really, following our naming convention. All right, read all. And what am I going to do with the list of movies? I'm going to send it to the repeater to be rendered. I'm going to say, hey, repeater. I think it's called movie repeater, right? Movie repeater dot data source is equal to whatever the read all returns. And then I'm going to bind it, right? Movie repeater dot bind data bind. That's it. See that? How much easier it is? Right, because what we've done is that we've abstracted those tasks, right? We've encapsulated it in a reusable component. Right? Okay, there it is. What about the creation? Well, same thing, right? The only thing that we need to do is notice that it's expecting an object, right, for the movie. So we have to create that movie object. So it says movie equal new movie. There it is, right? And what we're going to do is going to say movie, the title, we're going to grab it from the title text box. And the movie plot, we're going to grab it from the plot text. There it is. Now we have the movie. We just need to use now the data access object to create movie and pass it the movie object. Yes? Right. All right. Let's see if this, hopefully this will work exactly the way we had it earlier. All right, let's run this. See if it blows up. All right, it worked the same. Very good. Let's see if it works. What other movies did Cameron do? Abyss or Abyss? How do you spell that? The Abyss. Anybody saw that? We find some aliens under the sea. Click on create. Let me re-render. Let me see. Okay, so it does work, right? It adds it. It adds them in there. Very good. Why did Bootstrap not work here? What happened here? Did I not add Bootstrap? I could have sworn I did. All right, whatever. There it is. Okay, there it is. Okay. Very good. Okay, so now what we want to be able to do is edit or update or changes or delete things from here. Okay, or maybe click and go see the details of that particular object in a separate details page. Okay. All right, so let's do that. So, for instance, let's call this. Let's make a small app now that we have the very basics of this, right? So I'm going to grab the content of this. I'm going to create a new page that reuses all this, right? So I'm going to call it. Let's see. Let's call it. Actually, no. Before we do that, let's add another thing over here in the DAO. In the DAO, what we're going to do, okay, is add at the end of this a link that would allow us to take us to a details page. Right? Okay, now this is for the create. Sorry, it's over here in the iteration. In the last one over here, we're going to add here another TD that will navigate us to a details page. So TD, this will go to a href to details.aspx, which doesn't exist yet. It doesn't exist. And we're going to pass it as an argument the movie ID. We want to pass it here the evaluation of the ID, which we have here, don't we? We just copy it over here. There it is. So I'll copy it here. Equal that. Close it. It will say details. Details. So we're going to render this as a button. So this will be class button and then button. Let's see. What do we want? Warning. So it's yellow. Let's re-render this. And we have the create button at the end. You see that? If I click on details, it'll try to navigate to. Okay, it's trying to navigate to details.aspx, which doesn't exist. Let's create the page. Create the page. And right here, right? So there it is. I'm going to say new form. Oh, it's running. Is it running? Yeah, let me stop that. Let me create a new page here. Add new item. It's going to be called Details ASPX. Okay, there it is. And what do we want to do here? We want to render the details of that page, right? So let's go fetch it in the code behind. What we want to do. What we want to do is grab the movie from the ID. So here's a page load. Let's grab the ID of the movie from the request, right? So it's string movie ID, movie ID. Let's grab it from the request dot grab it from, it's called, I think it's called movie ID. Now we have the movie ID. What we want to be able to do is, hey DAO, we want to use the DAO, movie DAO. First thing that might come to mind is it says, oh, we have to query the database for that movie ID, right? You know, select star where from movie where ID is equal to movie ID, right? And your first temptation is to write the SQL here and there. Okay, please resist that temptation. Okay, do not just willy-nilly, even though you can, start writing SQL everywhere. Right? Instead, gather all your SQL in a nice object, right? That is responsible for managing all your SQL. So what we would like to be able to do is grab the movie from a DAO. Hey DAO, read, right? Read movie for ID. So we're going to pass you the ID. I'm going to give you the ID, and then you're going to give me back the actual movie, right? You do the SQL. You do everything that you need to do. Make sense? Then once I have the movie object, I can then tell the front end to render it. Okay? All right. Notice that this, I need to pass it the ID. Now the movie ID, I can pass it this right here as a string. Actually, the movie ID is what? Isn't it it's an integer, right? So I need to convert it into an integer. So let's convert that into an integer. So int ID is convert to integer 32 movie ID. I'm going to pass as an argument the ID. There it is. And that will retrieve the movie. Notice that read movie for ID doesn't exist yet. So I need to go into the DAO and write it. Let's do that. Let's go into the DAO. Where is it? It's in my app code. Experiments 4550. Movie DAO. There it is. So we had the read all, right? We don't have read by ID yet. Let's create one. So public movie read for ID. So I'm going to pass here the ID. And in here, I can do the connection and everything that I need to do. So let's do that. So I'm going to get the SQL connection. Although I wrote it already. Let me copy that. There it is. I'm just going to copy that. I have a SQL connection. I'll open it. And then close it right away. Okay. I'm going to read. Yes. Is there a question? No. I'm gonna do the SQL command. SQL command cmd is equal to connection dot create command, and I'm going to set the text to be select star from movie. But now before, the read all has no where clause, right? But this one does have a where clause because we just want to filter it, right? We're going to filter by the ID. With the ID, we're giving the ID as an argument. So where ID is equal to the parameter ID. So we have the text. Now we have to parameterize that ID. That's what we say, CMD. We're going to get the parameters. We're going to add a brand new parameter for that placeholder. I'm going to pass it the ID that we pass as an argument, and we're going to execute it. We're going to say CMD dot execute query. This one indeed is a reader, right? Because this is a select statement, and this does return. What is it complaining about? Oh, I put the ID in the wrong place. That's right. Okay. All right, we execute that. We're going to ask if, we're going to put that in a reader, right? Let's put it in a reader. So this is going to be a SQL data reader. There it is. And we're going to say if reader dot read, if there are any records that come back, I want to read the title. I want to read everything, right? So I'm going to read the ID from the reader sub ID. I want to read the title. And I want to read the plot. Right. Now that I have all of these, I can't forget to cast these to the right data type. So the ID is an integer, the title is a string, so I need to cast it to a string, and the plot is also a string, so I'm going to cast it to a string. Now that I have everything, I can create my new movie. Oh, what's going on here? This ID. I was complaining because I already passed in the ID. Okay, that's fine. I'll just override it with whatever's in the database. It should be the exact same ID, right? Because I'm filtering by ID, it has to be that ID. I'm going to create the instance movie. New movie with ID, title, and plot. There it is. And I'm going to return. After I close, actually, I should put this movie, to initialize this movie as null at first. Right? Meaning, worst case scenario, I return null. Okay, so there's movie, I close, and then I return movie. There we go. Okay? Right? So make sense? Oops. Right, so my read by ID or read for ID, I get a connection, I do a SQL, and it's filtered by the ID. I parameterize that ID with the argument that I'm passed in as a parameter. I execute the reader. I read the first record. There it is. And then that's it. I just fall out. I create the instance of a movie. And then after I close the connection, I return the instance of the movie I just found. Okay, notice that our API is very object-oriented, right? Notice that nowhere outside of DAO, nowhere outside of the DAO am I aware that we're using SQL. Yes? Right? There is no hint here that I'm using SQL. Right? This could be a non-SQL database, right? Or it could be a network connection. It could be written from a file, for all I know, right? It could be an XML document. Right? I don't know. Who knows? All right, now that I have the movie object, I want to send it to the user interface. So to send it to the user interface, what we could do is use a couple of text fields and labels to display this. So for instance, I could here create a label, ASP label, and give it title label. And then what I could do is feed the data for the title label from the retrieval, what I've retrieved from the database, right? So here's title. I can say title. Do a break. The same thing for plot. ID plot label. Run at server. All right, so it's time to try it out. So let's refresh this, and hopefully it won't blow up. And nothing came back. Let's see. 2. No. Well, at least it's not blowing up. Okay, what's going on here? Let's see. What is going on? Movie page load. I'm retrieving the movie ID. I'm parsing it, and oh, wait a minute. Where did I? Oh, I never. Okay, I created the labels on the UI, but I never fed anything to them, right? So let's do that. Let's say title label. I'm going to set the text for that label to be equal to movie dot title, and then plot label dot text. Oops. Text movie dot plot. There we go. All right, let's see if it works now. There it is. 3 for aliens. Right. 1, I get Avatar. Works. 2 for Terminator. Right. Go back. We go back. And we go here. We refresh. If we click here, we go to Avatar. Yeah, and we go back. We click on Titanic. So yeah, it works. So the DAO. So basically, we have 3 operations, right? We have 4. Wait, we have create, read one, read all. What else? That's it, right? Finally, we need the last 2 are update and delete. Well, let's start off with delete. Okay. So what we want to be able to do maybe is in the details page, what we'll do is we'll add here a delete button. It will say here ASP : button. We'll say that this ID is delete movie button. Run at server, and the text will be delete. And so on click, it's going to call delete movie button click. Okay, so notice that it creates it here. So what we would like to be able to do is, oh, you know what we should also add here? We should also add an ID. This is the ID, right? This is ID. And this is the ID label. ID label. And in here, we should feed that. Ooh, what happened? What happened to the title label? Why is it complaining? Oh no, I renamed it. What happened? Title label. All right. We're going to feed here. We're going to say ID label. We're going to feed it the ID of the movie. ID convert to string. All right. Now, when I click on the delete button, what do? We're going to grab the ID from the UI, right? We're going to grab the ID. Or actually, where else can we grab it from? Actually, it's already in the request, right? So we have that already here. Let's grab the ID from the request. There it is. I have the ID. And what I want to be able to do is say DAO dot, right? Just like we created one for read for ID, how about delete movie, right? We'll create a function inside of DAO that deletes movie. And it takes us arguments, going to take the ID of the movie that we want to remove. Okay? Right? Once we remove it, where do we want to go? We're looking at a movie that has been removed. Where should we go? We should go back to right? The page that lists all the movies, right? What's that page called? Right now, it's called this one, right? Repeater render using DAO. Very long. I'm going to copy that. So in the details, after removing successfully the movie, we're going to redirect. We're going to say response dot redirect. We want to go back to the list. And hopefully that list no longer contains the movie that has been removed. Anyway, so let's implement delete movie in the DAO. There it is. So we still have to do update and delete. Let's do delete. So public void delete movie, and it takes as argument the ID of the movie. So let's go get the connection. SQL connection. New SQL connect. I'm just going to copy. I'm going to copy the connection. I'm going to copy the open. I'm going to copy the command. There it is. And I shouldn't forget to close the connection. I have the command. The command text is going to be something like cmd.text is going to be delete from movie where ID is equal to some parameter. Right? And then we're going to parameterize. We're going to say cmd dot get the parameters. I'm going to add a new parameter, new SQL parameter for that ID. It's going to be the value that is being passed over with the ID. There it is. Okay, so all right, so we have the delete command. We're going to execute the command. Right, so let's execute the command. So command dot execute non-query, because we're not querying. Right, so that's either if it's an update, an insert, or delete, you use execute non-query. And then I believe that's it. That is it. Let me refresh this. If we go to, let's see, let's remove. If we go to Titanic, we click on delete, it goes back and notice that Titanic is no longer there. See that? But as we have shown, the delete, we're using a delete method inside of the DAO, right? As opposed to have this, right, all this SQL all over the place. We have it nicely all in one single place, right? Right? Okay, and we still have to do update, but I've run out of time. We'll do update when we come back next week. I mean, Thursday.